There comes a time in every life when the soul longs for something greater than itself, a time when we realize that our personal ambitions, desires, and struggles, no matter how grand, pale in comparison to the divine purpose that seeks to express itself through us. The question then arises, am I here to fulfill my own plans, or am I here to be used for the glory and purpose of the one who created me? We are not here by accident. Each of us is being called to something far greater than we can currently see. Yet the greatest hindrance to fulfilling this calling is the self, the ego that clings to its own wants, its own fears, and its own limited understanding. But there is another way, a way of surrender, of alignment, and of true transformation. It is the way of stepping into divine purpose, where we no longer seek to force our own will, but instead allow God to reveal His glory through us. What does it mean to say, Lord, use me for your glory and purpose, not my own? It is more than just a prayer. It is a commitment to live from a higher consciousness, to embody faith so deeply that we become living vessels of divine power. This is not a journey of struggle, but of awakening. The key lies within us, within the imagination, the feeling, the deep knowing that what God has willed is already ours. When we align with this truth, we no longer chase after purpose, we become purpose itself. Before the world was formed, before a single blade of grass emerged from the earth, before the stars were set in their places, there was the Word, the divine thought, the eternal imagination of God. Creation did not begin with hands shaping the dust. It began in the unseen realm of divine consciousness. Everything that exists first existed in the mind of God. And if we are made in His image, then our imagination is not merely a human faculty. It is the power of God within us, waiting to be recognized, waiting to be used. Most people misunderstand imagination. They believe it to be a fleeting dream, a childish fancy, something separate from reality. But this is the greatest deception. What we call reality is nothing more than solidified imagination. Every building, every invention, every movement in history first began as an unseen idea in the mind of man. What was once invisible became visible because someone dared to assume it was real before the world confirmed it. But the truth goes deeper than this. We do not merely use imagination, we live through imagination. Every experience in our lives, whether we recognize it or not, is a reflection of what we have first entertained in the secret place of the mind. The conditions of our lives are shaped not by external forces, not by fate, not by chance, but by the assumptions we persist in. The world is responding to us, always echoing back to us the beliefs we hold, the images we dwell upon, the feelings we persistently embody. This is why Scripture tells us, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. What we accept as true within ourselves becomes the law by which we live. The mind, when directed with faith, has the power to manifest what it beholds. The unseen becomes seen, the word becomes flesh, the thought takes form. This is the great mystery of creation, that imagination is not passive but active, not a dream but the force that gives birth to all things. If we truly grasp this, we understand that to be used by God is to align our imagination with His divine will. The greatest acts of faith are not those performed by the hands, but by the mind that dares to see what is not yet visible. The prophets, the visionaries, the men and women who shaped history were those who saw beyond appearances and held firmly to the unseen until it became reality. Imagination is the divine spark within us, the very breath of God moving through our consciousness. It is through this sacred faculty that we call things into existence, that we shape our destiny, that we either rise into our divine calling or remain bound by the limitations we refuse to release. And the greatest truth of all is this: what we imagine in faith with unwavering certainty must come to pass. When we say, Lord, use me for your glory and purpose, not my own, we are not asking for something separate from us. We are asking to become conscious creators, to awaken to the power already within us, to align our imagination with the divine blueprint, because whether we know it or not, we are always imagining, always creating, always shaping our world. The only question is, are we using this power in alignment with God's purpose, or are we allowing the illusions of the world to dictate what we believe to be possible? There is no greater struggle in the spiritual journey than the surrender of self-will. It is the battle between the ego and the divine, between the desires of man and the purpose of God. From the moment we become conscious of ourselves in this world, we are conditioned to believe that we must fight, plan, and strive to shape our own destiny. We are taught that to be successful, we must exert our will, take control, and force outcomes in our favor. And yet, the greatest paradox of spiritual truth is this: the more we try to control life, the more life resists us. The more we grasp at our own desires, the more they slip through our fingers. The human will is limited. It is shaped by experiences, by fears, by memories of failure, and by doubts of what is possible. It sees only what the eyes can perceive, only what logic can justify. But divine will is boundless, is not confined by past experiences, nor is it restrained by what seems probable or practical. God's purpose is not hindered by the limitations of the mind, for it operates from a realm beyond sight, beyond reason, beyond all earthly understanding. When we cling to self-will, we remain imprisoned by the smallness of what we think is possible. But when we surrender, we open ourselves to a reality that is greater than anything we could have planned for ourselves. To surrender is not weakness. It is the greatest act of faith. It is to say, Lord, I release my grip on the things I think I need. I no longer insist on my own way. Use me, shape me, lead me where you will. This is not a passive act, nor is it an excuse for inaction. It is not about sitting idly waiting for life to unfold while making no effort. Instead, it is the conscious decision to align our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions with a higher purpose. It is to trust that what is meant for us will come, not through force, but through divine orchestration. But the surrender of self-will does not come easily. The ego resists, for it thrives on control. It clings to personal ambitions, to attachments, to the fear that if we let go, we will be left with nothing. It whispers, if you do not fight for what you want, who will? If you do not plan every detail, how can you be sure things will work in your favor? Yet, true power is not found in control, it is found in trust. The one who surrenders is not weak but unshakable, for they no longer live in fear of outcomes. They no longer seek to manipulate life, but instead allow life to unfold in perfect order. When we surrender, we enter into a state of divine flow. Doors open where there were once walls. Opportunities appear without struggle. The burdens we carried begin to dissolve, not because we forced them away, but because we released the need to hold on to them. There is no longer the weight of striving, of forcing, of anxiously trying to make things happen. There is only the quiet confidence that everything is working in perfect harmony, even when we cannot yet see it. The greatest figures of faith did not achieve their purpose by sheer personal will. They did not fight against divine order. They aligned with it. Abraham left his homeland without knowing where he was going. Moses stood before the Red Sea with no escape in sight. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane prayed, not my will, but yours be done. Each of them in their own way surrendered their plans, their fears, and their limited understanding, allowing something greater to move through them. To surrender self-will is to die to the old self, the self that believes it must struggle, that it must compete, that it must always be in control. It is to awaken to the truth that we are not separate from God's purpose, but an extension of it. It is to realize that we are not here to chase after our own ambitions, but to be vessels through which divine will is made manifest. And when we let go, when we truly surrender, we find that we were never in control to begin with. What was meant for us was always waiting. We only needed to release our grip long enough to receive it. Everything in this world is a reflection of the unseen. Long before something appears in our reality, it exists in the realm of thought, of imagination, of belief. But thought alone is not enough. We may wish for many things, we may daydream of a better life, we may say all the right prayers, but unless we feel the reality of what we seek, it remains distant, unreachable, unreal. Feeling is the bridge between the invisible and the visible, the spiritual and the physical, the prayer and the answered prayer. It is the secret force behind every true manifestation. The mind may conceive an idea, but it is the heart that gives it life. The mere recitation of words, the intellectual agreement with a concept, the passive hope that something might come to pass, none of these have power unless they are accompanied by the feeling of already having received. Faith is not merely belief. It is the certainty, the conviction, the deep inner knowing that what has been imagined is already ours. But this knowing is not intellectual, it is emotional, it is felt. A person may say they believe in God's promises, but if their heart is filled with doubt, anxiety, and fear, then their true belief is not in God's fulfillment, but in the absence of it. What we feel, we accept as real, and what we accept as real must externalize itself in our world. Consider the difference between one who prays with desperate longing and one who prays with quiet confidence. The desperate man cries out for help, begging for an answer, feeling the weight of his unfulfilled desire. His focus is on the absence of what he seeks, and because he feels the absence, he continues to experience it. His prayer, though sincere, is rooted in lack. But the man who prays with quiet confidence is different. He does not plead, he gives thanks. He does not beg, he rejoices. He does not see himself as separate from his desire, but as already possessing it. He walks as if it is done, and because he feels it to be real, life must conform to his assumption. This is the great law of creation. That which we feel ourselves to be, we become. That which we feel we have, we receive. The world is not happening to us. It is responding through us. Every experience, every encounter, every opportunity is drawn to us by the vibrational state in which we dwell. If we feel joyful, we attract joy. If we feel abundant, we attract abundance. If we feel favored, life arranges itself to favor us. But the opposite is also true. If we feel unwanted, we experience rejection. If we feel incapable, obstacles arise. If we feel unworthy, blessings seem to slip away before they ever reach us. There is no greater deception than the belief that external circumstances dictate our emotions. The world would have us believe that we must first see change before we can feel it, that we must first receive before we can be grateful, that we must first be loved before we can feel love. But this is an inversion of divine law. It is not the world that must change first, it is we who must change. We do not feel something because it is real, it becomes real because we feel it. This is why Scripture tells us, when you pray, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. It does not say to wait for evidence. It does not say to look for confirmation. It does not say to hope that one day it might come. It says to believe now, in this very moment. And what is belief, if not the unwavering feeling that something is already true? But many will say, how can I feel something that I do not yet see? How can I rejoice when my situation seems unchanged? How can I feel abundance when my pockets are empty? To this I say, do you not already do this, but in reverse? Do you not feel the weight of fear before anything has happened? Do you not feel the pain of rejection before anyone has rejected you? Do you not feel the sting of failure before you have even attempted something? You already practice this law every day, but often to your own detriment. If you can feel lack before it arrives, you can also feel abundance before it manifests. If you can feel fear before the thing you fear comes to pass, you can also feel faith before the miracle unfolds. Feeling is the language of creation. It is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. It is the unseen force that moves mountains, opens doors, and calls forth things that are not as though they were. And the moment we master this truth, we no longer wait for circumstances to tell us what to believe. We decide in the secret place of our hearts what is true, and the world must rearrange itself to match that decision. There is a truth that few are willing to embrace, yet it is the foundation of all spiritual transformation. To be made new, one must first die, not in the physical sense, but in the deepest, most profound way, the death of the old self, the shedding of the identity that has been shaped by fear, doubt, and limitation. The self that clings to past failures, to memories of pain, to the belief that it must struggle, must fight, must prove itself worthy. This self cannot enter into the fullness of God's purpose. It must be released, buried, left behind, so that something greater may arise in its place. The world teaches us to hold tightly to who we believe ourselves to be. It conditions us to identify with our history, our experiences, our struggles. This is who I am, we say, as we recall our failures, our mistakes, the ways we have been hurt. We wear our past like armor, believing it protects us, when in truth, it is the very thing that keeps us bound. We say, I have always been this way, not realizing that these words are a prison. But the call of God is not to remain as we are, but to become something new. To step into divine purpose requires the complete abandonment of the old self, the self that doubts, the self that fears, the self that clings to its own way rather than surrendering to God's. This death is not easy. The old self does not go quietly. It resists. It fights to stay alive. It tells us that we need it, that without it we will be lost. It whispers fears of the unknown, of stepping into something greater than we have ever known. It clings to familiarity, even if that familiarity is pain. It seeks to remind us of every failure, every disappointment, every reason why we should not dare to believe that we are more than what we have been. But this is the great deception, that we are bound by what has been, that the past is a chain rather than a lesson, a weight rather than a stepping stone. To die to the old self is to let go of the need to control, to release the version of ourselves that was created by the world and step into the identity that was created by God. It is to no longer define ourselves by what we see with the physical eye, but by what is true in the unseen. It is to stop identifying with weakness and step into strength, to stop identifying with lack and embrace abundance, to stop seeing ourselves as separate from God's power and recognize that we are one with it. This is why Scripture speaks of being born again. not as a mere change in behavior, not as an outward display of devotion, but as a complete transformation of identity. The old self must die so that the new self, the self that walks in divine authority, the self that knows its purpose, the self that no longer lives in fear, may be revealed. This is not a gradual shift, not a slow transition. It is a decisive moment, a turning point in which one says, I will no longer live as I have lived. I will no longer think as I have thought. I will no longer be bound by what has defined me before. I am new. But to truly die to the old self, one must also die to the old ways of thinking. For thoughts are the architects of our reality. If we hold on to thoughts of unworthiness, of doubt, of struggle, then we will continue to experience them. If we continue to believe that we must earn our place, that we must prove our worth, that we must fight for what has already been given, then we will remain trapped in the illusion of separation. The mind must be renewed, the patterns of thought must be transformed, for it is impossible to step into a new life while carrying the burdens of the old. This is why surrender is so vital. To die to the old self is not about striving, about working harder, about forcing change. It is about release. It is about ceasing to hold on to the identity that no longer serves us, and trusting that when we let go, something greater will rise in its place. It is about understanding that the power of God is already within us, but it cannot flow through a vessel that is still clinging to its own limitations. It is about stepping into the realization that we are not separate from the divine, that we are not weak, that we are not lost, but that we have always been held, always been guided, always been called to something greater than what we have known. But the old self does not die in an instant. It lingers. It tries to resurrect itself in moments of doubt, in moments of fear. It tries to remind us of who we once were, to pull us back into old habits, old ways of thinking. And this is where persistence is required. To truly step into the new self, we must remain unwavering in our decision. We must refuse to look back. We must refuse to entertain the thoughts that once held us captive. We must affirm daily, hourly, moment by moment, I am not who I was. I am who God says I am. I am not bound by my past. I am not defined by my mistakes. I am new. And as this truth takes root, as it becomes the foundation upon which we stand, everything begins to change. Not because we forced it, not because we struggled for it, but because we allowed it. Because we finally let go. Because we finally understood that the only thing keeping us from the life we were meant to live was the refusal to release the life we had already outgrown. To live in the end of God's will is to dwell in the reality of what has already been established in the divine mind. It is to cease striving, to cease doubting, to cease questioning whether or not God's purpose for your life will be fulfilled, and instead to rest in the certainty that it already is. The human mind, conditioned by time, sees life as a progression of moments, a journey in which we must struggle to arrive at some future destination. But in the realm of God, there is no waiting, no becoming, no uncertainty. What He has willed is already complete. What He has spoken is already done. To live in the end of God's will is to align yourself with this truth, not as something that will one day happen, but as something that already is. But how does one live in the end? How does one walk as if the promise has already been fulfilled when the physical world seems to suggest otherwise? How does one maintain faith in the unseen when circumstances contradict what has been believed? The answer lies in the nature of God Himself. He does not operate according to the limitations of human understanding. He does not require physical evidence to prove His word. He does not wait for conditions to be perfect before declaring something finished. When He speaks, it is so. When He wills, it is done. His word does not return void, and His promises are not bound by the appearance of delay. To live in the end of God's will is to adopt this same divine perspective, to believe so fully in the completion of what has been promised that doubt has no place, hesitation has no hold, and fear has no voice. This is not an act of blind faith. It is not wishful thinking or self-deception. It is the highest form of spiritual awareness, the full recognition that reality is not shaped by what we see, but by what has already been decreed. The external world is nothing more than a reflection of the state of the inner man. If we persist in seeing ourselves as separate from the fulfillment of God's will, we will experience delay, struggle, and uncertainty. But if we choose to dwell in the end, to feel, think, and act as though the work is already complete, then the world must conform. It has no choice, for it is only the shadow of the deeper reality that exists within. This is why Scripture tells us, call those things that are not as though they were. It does not say to hope they will come. It does not say to wait until proof appears. It says to speak to declare, to live as if what has been promised is already true. And if we truly understand the nature of God, we know that it is true. The only thing that keeps us from experiencing it is our own unwillingness to accept it as finished. But the mind, trained by years of conditioning, resists this truth. It looks at circumstances, at obstacles, at delays, and says, "But nothing has changed." It waits for signs, for confirmation, for proof before it allows itself to believe. And yet, the very act of waiting is what prevents the manifestation. To wait is to acknowledge separation. To hope is to admit uncertainty. To look for signs is to confess that one does not yet fully believe. But to live, in the end, is to bypass all of this, to step directly into the state of completion, to dwell so deeply in the reality of fulfillment that the outer world has no choice but to reflect it. This is why Jesus said, "Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours." Not believe that you will receive it, but believe that you have already received it. The difference is everything. One position places fulfillment in the future, always just out of reach. The other places it in the present, in the now, in the eternal moment where God's will is already accomplished. But to live in the end of God's will is not merely a mental exercise. It is not enough to think about the fulfillment. One must feel it, embody it, walk in it as if there were no other reality. If God has called you to something, do not wait for confirmation. Assume the identity now. If He has promised provision, do not dwell in lack. Carry yourself as one who already possesses all that is needed. If He has spoken victory, do not live in fear. Move as one who has already overcome. This is the secret that separates those who struggle from those who walk in divine flow. The ones who struggle see themselves as waiting for God to move. The ones who walk in divine flow understand that He is already moved, and they align themselves accordingly. To live in the end is to release all doubt, all questioning, all second-guessing. It is to no longer pray from a place of asking, but from a place of thanksgiving. It is to no longer see yourself as waiting for breakthrough, but as already standing in it. It is to no longer hope for change, but to know that change is already accomplished. And the moment this truth is fully embraced, the external world shifts, not because it is creating something new, but because it is revealing what has already been established from the beginning. The glory of God is not some distant, unreachable force reserved for the heavens. It is not hidden away, waiting to be discovered in some far-off realm beyond human grasp. It is not confined to the stories of Scripture or the lives of prophets from ages past. The glory of God is here. It is now. It is living, moving, breathing, and it is revealed through you. From the beginning, man was created not as a mere servant of God, not as a powerless being destined to struggle under the weight of life, but as an expression of the divine itself, made in His image, formed by His hands, breathed into by His Spirit. Man was designed to be the vessel through which God's power is seen and known in the world. The glory of God is not separate from you. It is within you, waiting to be realized, waiting to be expressed, waiting to break forth in ways beyond what the mind can comprehend. But what is glory? It is the full expression of God's nature. It is the radiance of His presence, the manifestation of His power, the undeniable evidence of His reality. Glory is not mere light. It is transformation. It is the power that heals, that restores, that brings life where there was once death. It is the fulfillment of divine purpose. And this glory is not something external that must be sought after. It is something internal that must be unveiled. Yet many walk through life blind to this truth. They see themselves as small, insignificant, unworthy of carrying the presence of God. They believe that glory is reserved for a chosen few, for the saints, for the spiritually elite, for those who have somehow earned divine favor. But this is the great deception, that God's glory is given sparingly, that it is reserved only for those who have achieved a certain level of holiness. The truth is that His glory is already within you. It has been from the moment you came into being. You were created as a vessel of divine light, as a reflection of His power, as a living testimony of His presence on the earth. To reveal the glory of God is not to strive, to labor, to prove yourself worthy. It is to awaken. It is to recognize that the power of God is not something you must chase after, but something that has always been a part of you. It is to shed the false identity of limitation, to remove the veil of doubt, to silence the voice that says, "Who am I that God's glory should be revealed through me?" For that is the very question that has kept so many bound, this belief that only a select few can walk in divine power, that only certain people are chosen to carry His presence. But Scripture is clear. Christ in you, the hope of glory, Not Christ outside of you, not Christ distant from you, but Christ in you. His presence is not far away, it is within. His power is not reserved for others, it is already alive in you. But how is this glory revealed? How does one move from knowing this truth intellectually to living it as a reality? The first step is belief. Not mere acceptance, but full conviction. It is one thing to acknowledge that God's glory exists. It is another to know that it is meant to be revealed through you. It is one thing to read about miracles. It is another to walk in them. It is one thing to hear that the power of God is real. It is another to embody that power in everyday life. The moment you truly believe, the moment you fully accept that His presence is already within you, the world around you must shift to reflect this truth. The next step is alignment. The glory of God is not something that can be forced, nor is it something that can be contained. It flows effortlessly through the one who is fully surrendered, through the one who has released the need to control, through the one who has died to the old self and embraced the new. This is why those who walk in the power of God do not strive, they abide. They do not chase after signs and wonders, they simply allow them to flow. They do not beg for God's presence, they recognize that He has never left. To align with His glory is to remove every false belief, every limiting thought, every doubt that says, I am not enough. For the glory of God does not require human effort. It requires human surrender. But even in surrender, there is a call to action. The glory of God is not revealed through passivity. It is not something to be hidden, to be kept in secret, to be guarded out of fear. It is meant to be seen, to be known, to be experienced by all. Let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. The light within you is not meant to remain unseen. It is meant to illuminate, to transform, to bear witness to the reality of God's presence. When you walk in faith, when you love without condition, when you move in the authority given to you, you are revealing the glory of God. When you lay hands on the sick and they recover, when you speak life into situations that once seemed hopeless, when you stand unshaken in the face of adversity, you are revealing the glory of God. The world is waiting, not for another sermon, not for another theory, not for another debate about the existence of God, but for the manifestation of His power. It is waiting for those who will dare to believe that they are carriers of His presence. It is waiting for those who will rise up and walk in the authority that has already been given. It is waiting for those who will stop seeing themselves as ordinary and recognize that they have been called, chosen, set apart to be the living expression of divine glory. And when this truth is fully embraced, when the mind is renewed and the spirit is awakened, when fear is cast aside and faith takes its rightful place, the impossible becomes inevitable. The supernatural becomes natural. The presence of God is no longer something that is spoken about in theory. It is something that is seen, felt, and experienced in undeniable ways. And this is the very purpose for which you were created. Not to live a life of limitation, not to merely exist, not to wonder if you will ever see the fullness of God's power, but to be the vessel through which His glory is revealed to the world. The glory of God is not reserved for a distant future, nor is it limited to a select few. It is meant to be revealed through you here and now. You are not separate from His power. You are a vessel for it. You were created to walk in divine authority, to manifest His presence in the world, to be the living proof that God's promises are real. Every limitation, every doubt, every fear that has kept you from stepping into this truth is nothing more than an illusion. The moment you choose to see yourself as God sees you, the moment you embrace your identity as His reflection, everything changes. The time for hesitation is over. The time for wondering if you are worthy has passed. You are already chosen. You are already called. You are already equipped. All that remains is for you to believe it, to step into it, to walk boldly as the expression of God's will on the earth. Do not wait for another confirmation. Do not wait for a sign. The truth has already been spoken. Christ in you, the hope of glory. Live in this truth. Move in this truth. Let your life be the undeniable evidence that God's power is real, that His presence is tangible, that His will is already accomplished. Rise into who you were created to be. Let go of every false identity. Step into your divine purpose. And as you do, the world will see the glory of God, not in the sky, not in distant miracles of the past, but in you.